Person today is Sister Amina Mohammed. She is well known in our community. So I'll take a back seat and we'll welcome Sister Amina to come up and to begin the program. Assalamu alaikum. Just two quick announcements. As I said before, we have 3 buses that are going tomorrow for the protest in front of the US consulate. I believe there are only a few spaces left, and Sister Anila is outside. If there's anyone who is interested in going tomorrow, we're leaving at around 12:30, at least gathering here at 12:30, leaving at around 1 o'clock, and returning at around 5 o'clock. There is one request that we need to make. These buses do cost, but because of the gravity of the situation, we have to make quick decisions in terms of ensuring that we have some people at the protest. If there's anyone who would like to sponsor a bus or sponsor a part of the cost of that bus, please see me, inshallah. The buses cost around $400 each to go and to come. If you would like to sponsor one bus or even the part of the cost for a bus, please see me, inshallah. But the buses are full. And the second announcement that we have to make is that we do have some displays outside at the back. You can, in the meantime, get some coffee or some tea and come back inside, inshallah, and take a look at the displays outside. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Sister Amina will come now.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this very last programming session for Islamic History Month here at the IIT. I'm really excited to kind of guide you guys through a very cool and very interesting program today, talking about women in arts and sciences, and also specifically women in media. But we're going to begin the night, inshallah, with a Quran recitation. And so I'm going to welcome the brother to the stage, inshallah, and then we'll follow with some more programming.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن المسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات والقانتين والقانتات والقانتين والقانتات والصادقين والصادقات والصابرين والصابرات والخاشعين والخاشعات والمتصدقين والمتصدقات والصائمين والصائمات والحافظين فروجهم والحافظات والذاكرين الله كثيرا والذاكرات أعد الله لهم مغفرة وأجرا عظيما. صدق الله العظيم.
MashaAllah, that was very beautiful. All right, so next up on today's program is going to be Sheikh Abdul Hakim Quick, which for those of you who have been coming regularly know that that's a really beloved part of our programming. So I would like to welcome Sheikh up to the stage, inshallah, to guide us through a short program.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa usalli wa usallam ala Sayyid al-Awwaleen wal Akhirin, Nabiyyina Muhammad, wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Wa ba'd. All praises are due to Allah, Lord of the worlds, and peace and blessings be constantly showered upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad, the master of the first and the last, and upon his family, his companions, and all those who call to his way and establish his sunnah to the day of judgment. My beloved brothers and sisters, to our friends, I begin with the greeting words of the righteous. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, we want to especially welcome our visitors who are here tonight for this special program, and also the members of the deaf Muslim community, to welcome you here tonight. May Allah bless you all for coming, and may Allah accept the work that is being done here in the IIT and in other institutions in the GTA. The last few weeks have been very painful for Muslims throughout the world. And it especially become very intense in the last few days, even today itself, with the suffering that Palestinian people are going through. And what is hurtful to many of us is not just the suffering itself, but it is the disregard that people in power, people in the media have for the suffering of people within the Muslim world. Many Muslims feel depressed. We feel like there's nothing to live for. Some even feel weak and debilitated because of what they are seeing around them. But I want to remind you that our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, went through tremendous suffering, and his companions were surrounded, they were insulted, they were humiliated, they were killed in large numbers, but they continued. And they did not allow that oppression to stop their belief in the Creator or in their willingness to establish justice. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, who did not speak from himself, he spoke with words that are of great value, not just to people 1400 years ago, but even to us today. And he said in one tradition, reported by the great scholar in Sahih Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, Al-mu'min al-qawi khayrun wa ahabbu ila Allah min al-mu'min al-da'if wa fi kullin khair. He said that the strong believer is better and more beloved to Allah than a weak believer. But in both of them, there is goodness. And when he was speaking about strength, as he related in another tradition, he said the strong person is not the one who is the good wrestler, but the strong person is the one who controls himself when he's angry. Self-control. And then the Prophet, peace be upon him, gave a great wisdom which we should rely upon in these times. And he said, ihris ala ma yanfa'uka wasta'in billah wa la ta'jaz wa in asabaka shay'un fala taqul law anni fa'altu kidha wa kidha kana kidha wa kidha walakin qul qaddara Allahu wa ma sha'a fa'ala fa inna law taftah amal ash-shaytan. The Prophet continued and said, strive for that which benefits you. Seek your help from Allah and do not become weak. And if a calamity strikes you, do not say, if I had done this and that, it would have been like this or like that, because verily, if, the word if, opens up the doors for the devil. And so we are encouraged to be strong in everything that we do, all sections within our community. And if we look at the original message and the original community of believers, it was a community of empowerment. Empowerment under oppression. People were being drowned in idol worship. It empowered them with the belief in one God. Racism and tribalism. Islam brought the equality of all people. Women being oppressed to an unbelievable degree. But Islam empowered the women to the point where we recognize that the first believer was the wife of the Prophet, Khadija radiallahu anha. May Allah be pleased with her. She not only accepted Islam, but she confirmed. She confirmed Islam. And when the Prophet had come back from the mountain after getting the revelation from Jibreel, the angel, he trembled because he did not know whether this was an evil force or a good force. And Khadija covered him up. And she confirmed the message. She was a mountain of strength. Right in the beginning, when the early Muslims had embraced Islam and were going through tremendous trouble, the family of Ali Yasir were being punished terribly. And the mother, Sumayya, may Allah be pleased with her, stood for her faith, and she was killed. She was the first shaheed, the first person to die for Islam was a woman. Some of the greatest scholars in the early times were women. The wife of the Prophet ﷺ, Aisha radiallahu anha, reported the second most hadith sayings of the Prophet, more than any of the other great Sahaba, great scholars. And she and Salama, may Allah be pleased with her, another of the wives of the Prophet, they were scholars. They were scholars of fiqh, of jurisprudence, to whom the companions would go to in order to gain divine understanding about what they should do. So in the early community, women were an integral part. They were not locked up. They were not disregarded or put down. And that is the essence of the message of Islam. It is empowerment. And up until today and throughout our history, women have played a critical point, a critical role in the movement of Islam. Throughout Asia, Middle East, Africa, in the Americas, women have been the solid point of the community. When I would travel to different places around America and around the Africa and Caribbean, and I come into a community, I would look to see if there were women involved in the activities. Because then I would realize this is a balanced community. This community has a future. If there are no women involved, if there are no youth involved, if there is tribalism, if there is oppression, then this community has no future. And so we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for empowering our sisters throughout the ages. And that is not just in the past, that is in the present. Because women, especially because of the wearing of hijab, are bearing the brunt of Islamophobia, hatred, and attack throughout the world. Even here in our beloved Canada, people have come here for neutrality and for peace. Hate actions, Islamophobia, has increased 1,000% in the past month. 1,000% it has increased. And Muslim women are bearing the brunt of this. But alhamdulillah, they have stood strong. And we are here tonight as the final program within Islamic History Month to hear from our sisters, to celebrate their achievements, to interact, and to pray that Allah Azza wa Jal would raise up more bright shining stars from the women of Islam. May Allah bless them and strengthen the men to see, to be balanced, and to practice the Islam of our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give peace, give security to our brothers and sisters in Gaza. May Allah accept them in this struggle. May Allah send down malaika, angels, as He did in the Battle of Badr, in the trench, and other activities. May Allah fill that land with angels to defend them and to protect them. And if Allah wills to take them, may Allah put them into the highest part of paradise. I leave you with these thoughts, and I ask Allah to have mercy on me and you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Before I introduce the next program element, I do want to point out that right beyond this gym partition, Osman Jalaluddin, who is going to be speaking later today, although I'm pretty sure she needs no intro, is selling some of her books on site at IIT. They're right back there. It's cash only, but they are all $20, and all proceeds go to Gaza. All right. So moving on, I'm very excited to welcome two superstars from the IIT community to the stage very soon. We're going to be talking about female icons, Muslim women icons in media, and we're going to be speaking with Sakina Sayed and Janella Masa. I'm going to give a short bio, although I don't know if that's entirely necessary today. And inshallah, they're both going to come up, and there's going to be a short interview between Sakina and Janella. So, Sakina Sayed is a writer focused on public policy and culture. She has written for the New York Times, Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail, and other publications. She recently completed an editorial fellowship at the local magazine and a fellowship at the Asian American Journalists Association. She graduated from New York University in 2023, where she studied public administration and creative writing. Janella Masa requires no intro. Janella is a Canadian Screen Award-winning broadcast journalist and media personality. She is best known for making history as the very first woman to anchor a national newscast in North America while wearing a hijab. I know many of us took note of that day. It was very exciting. She is an entrepreneur, a media expert, a public speaker, and an influential social media personality. Janella first appeared on Canadian television in 2015 when she was hired as a video journalist for CTV News in Kitchener, and she is believed to be the very first hijab-wearing television news reporter again in North America. She's made international headlines after anchoring the evening newscast the following year while working for City News in Toronto. So she has over 12 years of experience in news, behind the scenes and on air, and Janella has worked for both local and national news outlets in both television and radio. So I would like to welcome both women to the stage, inshallah, for an interview session between the both.
Assalamualaikum. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And thank you, Amina, for that introduction. I am really, really excited to get the chance to ask Janella about her amazing career. As Amina mentioned, she needs no introduction, but for me, as a emerging Muslim journalist, it has been such such a source of inspiration to see your career over the last decade. And I'm so excited to get to ask you about that today. So I have a couple of questions for you, but I think the first one is just coming off of what was said, that you are somebody who has made history in many ways for Muslim women, for women of color. And I guess thinking about where you started your career, I'm wondering what that looked like for you when you weren't able to see yourself in those spaces before. As somebody who makes history, how do you even consider starting on that path?
Absolutely. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thanks so much for having me tonight. Yeah, it's hard to imagine yourself in a space when you haven't seen anyone who looks like you there. And, I always say I was that kid in class who, my report card was always, Janella's a good student, but she talks too much. She's not supposed to. And so I always kind of had the gift of the gab, and my parents were like, encouraging me to pursue a career that kind of leaned into that. They were the ones who kind of encouraged me. My mom always said, "Oh, I could see you hosting a show or something like that." And I go into radio because then it doesn't matter what I look like. No one's gonna know. No one's gonna see my hijab. And she said, "Well, no. Why would you want to kind of diminish yourself in that way? You're a star. You belong on TV." That's kind of the way my family always saw me. And so that kind of always encouraged me. They kind of saw something in me. And so having that family support was a big part of it. But going into that space, the reality of going into that industry and into that space, it was kind of shocking to me when I went into my first internship in the largest local newsroom in the country, in the most diverse city in the world. And I had grown up, in North York and Scarborough. I went to school where, I wasn't the only girl in hijab. I went to a very big high school in Scarborough, and yet I walked into this newsroom, and it was the first time I really felt like an other. I really felt like an outsider. It was shocking to me. The newsroom did not look like the Toronto that I had grown up in, and certainly this is the space that I expected to be full of people who were educated and cultured and intellectuals, and yet I'm sure many of them, that was the first time they were having a conversation with a woman in a hijab. And I was, suddenly became the resource on all things Muslim and all things Islam. And I was like a 22-year-old university grad. And so as much as it was difficult to be alone in that space, it also made me realize how much I needed to be in that space, because the stories about Muslims were happening with or without us. And, I'd get tapped to answer questions or connect with the community. And I would think to myself, what would they do if I wasn't here? What would this story look like? How would this be framed? Whose voices would they include? So that's what's kept me in the newsroom for a long time, even when it was really difficult.
Yeah, and that's such an important point that you raised about having never been in those spaces before, and maybe even being the first time that some of your colleagues had spoken to a Muslim woman in hijab. And I wanted to ask what you think that role was for you as a Muslim woman journalist, to tell those stories. What kind of unique approach that lends itself to that might not otherwise have been there?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I certainly realized I had an important role. I'm talking 13 years ago now, and yet I'm seeing it kind of repeat itself again. Just thinking about what had happened uh, yesterday. There was a couple of vigils this week that included the word martyr in it, and I have colleagues who are like, I was having to explain to my newsroom the context behind that word because there is a very stereotypical connotation attached to it, right? So when these voices aren't in the newsroom, again, what does that coverage look like, right? So. Um, yeah, I certainly felt the pressure of having to, be a glossary, be an encyclopedia of information. Um, and it's still very important. At least now, 10 years later, um, there are more of us in these spaces, but it's still an uphill battle.
And something I thought that was really beautiful that you mentioned in the previous question was how your family played such a big role in encouraging you not to sort of cancel yourself out of those opportunities before you started. And I was wondering because I know for me as a hijabi, and I'm sure for so many other hijab wearing or non hijab wearing Muslim women, there are these public perceptions of Muslim women as people who are expected to take a backseat in society. And I was wondering what it was like for you to come from this wonderful encouraging space where you were pursuing these opportunities and then be in a visible public facing role where maybe the people in your audience had the opposite impression of what you maybe would be or should be.
Yeah, you might think that that is a disadvantage, but in some ways it was an advantage because everyone in every room I stepped into, everyone underestimated me. So, number one, I would step into rooms where people would assume I was the intern, and I was like, "No, I'm the producer," or they didn't expect me to have personality and be charismatic and be funny, have a sense of humor. I could take a joke, and part of it too was also having to do that, having to really humanize myself in a way to say, "I'm not that different from you," and having to let things roll off a little more than I probably should, um, to disarm people, to let them into my world, um, to gain their trust and gain their respect. It was exhausting. It is exhausting. Sometimes you feel like you can't bring your full self to a space as much as there is this, especially in the last couple of years, this sort of EDI push, equity, diversity, and inclusion, to bring diverse faces, and it's just that often diverse faces into these spaces, but often it doesn't. They just want your face there. They don't actually want your voice there, and so that is a challenge to be in those spaces and to ensure that your place there is a meaningful one, that you are actually heard, and yeah, it's a challenge because you're constantly trying to uh, get people who often see you as so foreign and other to really just see you as their fellow Canadian.
And so for me, I work in print. So when people read my work, they usually skim over the byline. But even then, you do get a response from the audience that may not have anything to do with your work, but has to do with the identity that you're bringing into the newsroom. And for you, in such a trailblazing and such a uniquely visible role, I'm curious about what that, I guess, relationship or experience with your audience, with such a wide audience, was like for you, both positive and negative.
Yeah, in some ways, it's super frustrating to be judged before you even open your mouth. I recognize that my existence in these spaces was a radical one, just by me being there before I even said anything. And so, sometimes I have to just take that as a win. I don't have to fight every battle. Me being here is a win. But yeah, I remember when my show first launched, before our first show even aired, there were 3 columns written about me in French media about why I shouldn't have this role, why the public broadcaster shouldn't hire me, because I'm inherently unbiased or showing my bias by wearing hijab on um, on TV. And, you know, I actually specifically remember the third one was finally an interview. There were 3 columns written about me. I wasn't interviewed for them. And finally, a journalist called me up. And her whole attitude was just so dismissive. You know, she starts the interview. Uh, well, I don't really know much about you. Can you tell me like about your show or whatever? No, so right off the bat, she's telling me she hasn't bothered to do her research, learn anything about me before she even has walked into an interview. Um, and she said something like, oh, there must be so many people, so many experienced people who feel like you got to jump the queue and get this job ahead of them. Um, and I thought, you know what? Watch the show. Maybe watch the show first, and then decide if I'm qualified for it or not. My first show hasn't even aired, and you're already making a judgment about whether or not I should be here. Watch it, and then tell me what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so powerful to hear you say that, and it's also so painful to hear about almost how even before you had the opportunity to be judged on your own merit, these preconceptions were already out there. And for you, as somebody who was constantly in these spaces, and pushing through that and doing the best work that you could put out, what was that process like for you of developing sort of resilience and internal confidence to do the work that you set out to do?
I certainly always felt like I had to work twice as hard to get half the recognition, that I didn't have room to make mistakes, that I didn't have space to be mediocre. I always had to strive for excellence because I couldn't leave any room for someone to say I didn't belong here or I didn't deserve to be here. So, I always had to push myself and I always had extra pressure on myself. At the same time, a lot of the criticism that came my way was simply based on my appearance, right? Was simply someone seeing my face in a picture on a newspaper, on a headline, or the ad for my show, and writing in to express uh, you know, their discontent. And I took some solace in the fact that, well, they're not criticizing my journalism. I'm very happy to take feedback on my journalism if you have something negative to say about it. So in my mind, I kind of just put them in the box of like, that's a you problem, not a problem.
Yeah. Um, and so, now that we've it's been about, I think you said, I think it was 12 years, so more than a decade since you started out. And you mentioned that some of those biases that you saw at the beginning of your career, we are seeing replicated now. And I think it would definitely be remiss if I didn't mention that we are in a space where looking at the media can be really, really distressing and disappointing for both Muslim people as readership and viewership, but also for Muslim people in journalism, to see that kind of rise of Islamophobia and heightened scrutiny, and a lot of what it feels like the progress that we looked for. And I was wondering, now that you're in this space where you are established, and I have seen you making, speaking and talking about your experience covering these stories and being in this space now that we're facing all of these challenges. I was wondering what it's like for you to sort of remain principled and also seeing sort of these disappointments. What is it like to push through in the industry?
Yeah, I selfishly am relieved that I'm not in a newsroom right now, because being in a newsroom at this time as a Muslim is incredibly difficult. I have lots of Muslim journalist friends who are struggling a lot, being in these newsrooms, fighting these fights, being alone in the newsroom and fighting these fights, having to be careful in raising their concerns because then they're deemed as too emotional or too biased and unable to objectively report on these stories, and then they might get removed from even being able to cover these stories. So that is really frustrating. But I have, I feel glad that I am on the outside in the sense that one of the reasons that I left is that I wanted to engage community more. Because one of the struggles that I felt was, even when I first started, I was a producer and I would get asked to help find people to comment on media stories. Can you go to your mosque and ask, get an imam or someone, whatever? And there was a lot of fear. There's a lot of apprehension. People said, we don't want to talk to the media. They twist our words and they, take us out of context and they have their own agenda and they vilify us. And so we don't want to engage with that. The problem with that is that the stories were being told about us, with or without us being part of the conversation. So for me, I really, wanted to help empower Muslims to be confident in engaging with the media, to understand how to do it successfully in a way to tell our stories and take control of the narrative. And that's something that, I'm working on a lot now. I've had so many conversations this week with so many different people about the importance of engaging with media. I mean, just today there was a rally and a protest. And, there's always, the problem is when you have such a huge crowd of people who are coming from so many different communities who all have their own personal experiences, and a reporter comes up to a random person in the crowd who doesn't know how to engage or what to do, that person now becomes the representative of the entire protest, right? So how do we make sure that folks who are at these rallies know how to effectively communicate in such a way that is going to present our community in a positive way and use that platform? Because going to a rally and saying, we're all here, pay attention, look at us, the microphone is going to be there. So what do we say now that we have it, right? And how do we say it in a way that touches the hearts and minds of the average Canadian to care about this issue? So for me, I'm really focused on trying to help more Muslims get media trained, become media savvy, learn how to use it, because it is a powerful, powerful medium that has been used to characterize our community in a certain way. So we need to reclaim our identities in these spaces. Part of what I'm doing now is I'm doing more media consulting, media training, media coaching. So if anybody wants any media training, email me. Getting community groups to offer them to their community so that more people can be engaged with the media. So it's not just, me by myself in my newsroom trying to convince them to, take a certain angle or think about a story in a certain way. It's many of us collectively saying, hey, the way that you are portraying us in your news stories is unfair, it's incorrect, it's racist, and it's dangerous what you're doing. It is hurting our communities, and we have seen the impact of it.
I think that's such a powerful idea that there are other ways to have agency in news coverage. And I was wondering, to expand on that a little bit, what is it like for you to go from somebody who, as you mentioned, you were working as an individual in these spaces, you were a representation for so many, and what insights do you bring from that sort of into your work doing media consulting for a broader community?
It was something that I had actually started doing 10 years ago when I was freelancing and I was in between jobs. And I started, thinking about doing media training. I could see there was such a need for it. Unfortunately, because once I started working for either the private or public broadcaster, I wasn't allowed to do that. It was seen as a conflict. If I was going to go and train somebody on how to talk to the media and then turn around and interview them, I couldn't do both those things. So I had to kind of make a choice. I mean, there were many, many reasons that I decided to leave my last job. And I think, it would have happened probably in the next year or two anyway. I went on maternity leave. And so that was a big life change. And then I decided not to go back. So I think that having my family, as a new focus, pushed me in that direction sooner. But I also felt like I could do more meaningful work. I could make more meaningful change by helping people navigate a space where I didn't have anyone to guide me through. So when I was trying to navigate the space, there was very few, almost no Muslim journalists, particularly not on television. There were Muslim journalists in print, but not on television, who I could turn to for support and guidance on how to survive, not just survive, but thrive. And that's just it, is that I was surviving. What I would like to do is help people thrive in these spaces. So I felt like that could actually be more meaningful than me just lonely me, in my newsroom and my few friends who were in other newsrooms alone trying to tackle these challenges.
And Now you're also, working as an instructor for journalism students at Toronto Metropolitan University, which is amazing. And I was wondering, sort of, with this really unique background and these really developed skills that you're bringing to that, what does your approach look like when teaching a new generation of journalists?
Yeah, and that's the other side of it, right? Is talking to the people who are going to be in newsrooms, who are going to be making decisions, who are going to be thinking about what stories they tell and how to tell them. And, encouraging them to think about these things in a different way. And we already see that the next generation has approached news and journalism and activism in a different way. You mentioned one of the videos that I made, and I mentioned the fact that, 3 years ago, a journalist could get in trouble for saying Black Lives Matter, that it was seen as a political statement. That if you say that now, you can't cover stories about racism because you've, um, you know, drawn your line in the sand, which is ridiculous because there are so many things that journalists operate from a baseline, right? If we're talking about human rights and we operate from the baseline of saying yes, human rights good, right? Racism bad. And we're starting from that place, then it shouldn't be a controversial thing for me to make that statement. Similarly, we look at what's happening now. If we're talking about human rights and saying, wanting to support human rights, that shouldn't be a controversial thing. That shouldn't be a thing that now precludes you from being able to be part of this conversation. And so for me, even this question about bias and objectivity in general is a flawed one. And I question the idea about whether that should be the goal for a journalist, to be completely impartial and objective. And the example that I always use was COVID. We were covering COVID for 2 years. And it was impossible for any journalist to be completely neutral and objective and unbiased because COVID was something that impacted every single one of us in some way. Maybe we had kids who were in school that was shut down, or maybe we had friends who have a business that was impacted, or maybe you had thoughts on mandatory vaccines. Whatever it was, all of those things were influencing how you told your story. And it could be argued that it actually made you a better journalist. It actually meant that you knew what questions to ask, to approach this, or you could be more empathetic because you had lived it. So to me, it seems kind of absurd that we should remove our humanity from our journalism, from our reporting, and pretend like we are some robot, some impartial observer. I think that we should actually start from the place of saying, actually, no, I'm coming from this perspective, but I'm understanding that. Maybe I'm checking it at the door, and I'm going to open my eyes to some other perspectives as well.
Yeah, and that's so critical to acknowledge because even before journalists of color were in newsrooms or on broadcast, other people were in those newsrooms coming from their own baseline. So it shouldn't only come into question when it's a racialized or a hijabi journalist. Now, I'm sure that you also have gotten this question so often in the past, but especially in the really challenging media climate that we're in right now, I was wondering if you have insights or advice for young Muslims and young Muslim women who are coming up into the field or thinking about a career in media at such a fraught and painful time. I was wondering, what would you say to them?
You have to really love it. You have to really want to do it for the right reasons. It's not easy, and certainly not, as you said, right now, the climate is very difficult. I know a lot of people who actually want to leave the industry because of how difficult it is, but our voices are so needed. So you have to really do it for the right. You have to really want to do it for the right reasons, because it's not easy.
And the other part of that, kind of speaking to the new work that you're doing, is thinking about, I guess, our Muslim audience as consumers of, watchers of news, readers of news, consumers of media. I was wondering maybe if you had anything to say about what role that we can take as a community when we consume, when we take ownership of our viewership.
Absolutely. We have to remember that our voices matter as, the Canadian public, as the viewing public. Instead of watching things and saying, "Oh, here they go again," we kind of shrug our shoulders and say, "Well, they have their agenda and their bias, so they're going to do what they're going to do," and we kind of letting it happen, right? We have to hold these institutions accountable because the only way they respond is to public pressure, is losing dollars. They don't respond to doing it because it's the moral, good, right thing to do. It has to make there has to be a business case for it, right? So, certain communities are very organized in making sure that the second something is remotely, critical or something that they don't like, they will mobilize and bury that newsroom in a mountain of emails. And frankly, it's just a real pain for them. And they operate from the place of, oh, well, we don't want to get emails, so make sure you do this, that, or the other when you're writing this story. And so we don't do that as a community. We allow this perpetuating of these stereotypes to happen. We they never face the consequences for it. So why would they stop, right? And so we have to hold them accountable. We have to say when we see something, we're going to write to the newsroom. We're going to write to the ombudsman. We're going to write to CRTC. We're going to make a complaint. You can't just say that. We can't just say those things and allow them to go unchecked. So as a community, we have to take that ownership as well.
And I think that kind of brings me to the end of the questions that I had. But I know that IIT probably didn't have this really tragic and painful climate in mind when planning to interview you. I think it's so wonderful and impactful that we do get to hear your insights at this time, and to know that also, like you mentioned, because your career trajectory is shifting right now, it's almost a blessing in many ways that our communities do get to be equipped with the wealth of knowledge that you're bringing to the table, mashallah. So thank you so much for
Thank
taking the
you.
time
Thank you
to
for your
speak with me.
questions.
Okay. Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah khair, ladies. That was wonderful. I was taking notes to reflect on later. All right, so this brings us almost to the very end of our program today, except that we have a beautiful, beautiful panel today with some members of the IIT community who span a variety of different careers, industries, and professions. And I'm really excited to welcome 4 of them up to the stage. I want to welcome Bilqis Quick, Uzma Jalaluddin, and 2 students, Hannah and Sumaya. You guys can clap yet. All right, I think we might need 2 more chairs up here. Perfect. All right. Well, they get settled. Inshallah, let me read their bios. We'll begin with Uzma Jalaluddin, who is a critically acclaimed and best-selling novelist, playwright, and teacher. She writes nuanced and entertaining stories about Muslims, South Asians, and Canadians, and is the author of Much Ado About Nada, published in 2023, 3 Holidays and a Wedding, published in 2023. Hannah Khan Carries On from 2021, and Aisha at Last from 2019. And she has also written a play called The Rishta from this year as well. Her novels have been optioned for film and television, including by Amazon Studios and Mindy Kaling. Go mashallah. You guys can clap. Yeah. All right, Bilqis Quick, mashallah, acclaimed member of the community, first of all. I've seen you since I first came to the IIT. Bilqis Quick is the owner and lead floral designer at Zuhur Designs and her successful floral design business of 10 years. Her designs have been featured in more than 5 prominent Canadian and American bridal and art magazines. And along with designing florals for weddings and events, she is known for her floral art installations that have been displayed in downtown Toronto. You can find her at her shop and design studio in Markham and on Instagram and Facebook at Zuhur Designs. I'm going to ask you to clap for all of the ladies. Oh, yeah. Right. And now we have some students. I know Hannah is here. I think it's Samaya's on. Okay, perfect. We have 1 student here today, Hannah Ali. Hannah is a successful youth entrepreneur who started her first venture at the age of 8, mashallah, showcasing a very early entrepreneurial spirit. She's a second-year mechanical engineering student who was awarded the Schulich Leader Scholarship, Canada's most coveted scholarship at $100,000. And with a passion for empowering women in STEM and breaking the barriers of a heavily male-dominated field. We're really happy to have her here today. Give it up. All right, so I think the way this is going to work is I'm going to ask you guys a few questions about your professions. Seeing as there's only three of you in an extra chair, I'm going to sit down so that the it balances out. All right. Much more comfortable. Alhamdulillah. Okay. So we have three women here from three fundamentally different professions, and just different jobs in general. And I know for many young people who are here, it's really difficult to figure out what you want to be and to find people in those jobs, especially when they're niche or they're not your doctor, lawyer, engineer, right? Not to say that engineering doesn't need a lot of support in the Muslim community as well, particularly for women. It's hard to find, someone who's there. So I want to ask each of you first and foremost, did you expect to find yourselves in the industries that you're in? And if not, how did you get there?
Hey, assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm so happy to be here at at the IIT, and thank you so much to the IIT for organizing this wonderful series. I'm always so proud of this community and especially the organization behind it. Um, uh, so your question was, did I expect to be a writer? So I am a writer. I write novels. I did a brief stint at the Toronto Star. I wrote a column for about 7.5 years, and I've written 4 novels and a play. I did not expect to be here at all. I'm a high school teacher in addition to that. And I think one of the reasons why I never saw myself in this position of being able to contribute to the art landscape, the literary landscape of Canada, is because I had very few to no mentors. I had no one to look up to and say, "Oh, that's a career that is possible for me as a visible South Asian Muslim woman in Canada. This is something that I can aspire to." And I think that's what we're really critically lacking in our community. Alhamdulillah, things are changing, but just the lack of representation was really missing for me anyway.
So being a woman in engineering, um, my main passion is entrepreneurship. So at the start, I don't think I would have seen myself as an engineer, but I like to plan ahead. So from high school, I was thinking, what am I going to become? What am I going to become? And engineering really provides me with a lot of skills that I can use as an entrepreneur, and that's why I chose it as my path. So taking that into account, I'm happy where I am.
Welcome, everyone. Being a floral designer, well, first of all, it's like the layman term is florist. But the reason why I refer to myself as a floral designer is because I really look at it through an art lens, and that's mainly what I'm doing, is creating art with florals. I didn't I didn't think that I would ever be in a career like this, but life has it, and I had to, pick a career to make money basically 8 years ago, and just launched the actual business of floral design. And alhamdulillah, like it's really brought me into spaces where I'm pretty much the only person that looks anything remotely like myself. My color, my hijab, and just being a representative in those spaces.
I love that, mashallah. Mic works, okay. Thank you, I do want to ask, because we're dealing with different industries here, and I know, Hannah, you're a student, but still, I know engineering buildings have, different kinds of student groups in them, and sometimes you can find community there, and sometimes you don't, and whether that's in design, in the literary world, or at school, do you guys feel like you're a part of a wider community, or do you feel like you're kind of a lone wolf in those spaces, particularly as Muslim women?
Well, since I have the mic, I'll just answer. Definitely a lone wolf. My space is very white, and definitely not anything like any representation of a religion at all. And that is not only just in the event space. There are South Asian event spaces and Eastern and African spaces and event. But when it comes to like floral art design that's being displayed in any sort of um, larger space or open to the public type situations like downtown and different places like that is definitely white prominent. And so, yeah, I definitely see like, find myself as the lone wolf, just be like, wow, how did I actually get here? Sitting amongst these people. But alhamdulillah, I mean, it's the feeling is just um, being there and being a representative. I'm going to say that a lot in this, but yeah, definitely a lone wolf.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely a lone wolf as well. Engineering has come some ways in terms of representation, but if I have a tutorial of 40 people, it'll be me and one other girl. And that's not even talking about hijabi. It's not a type of thing. So based off of pure numbers, there's a lack of women. And then if we go on to hijabis, from what I've seen in my years, probably five. And I'm talking about a class of like 500 people. So definitely a lone wolf in that space. And again, the second you enter, people always look at you. So you're definitely representing Islam. And I think you kind of have to find ways to fit yourself in. And it was really hard to do my first year, but in my second year, I'm trying to get more involved in communities which don't have representation like me, but really being able to add my input into student activities.
I've been thinking about this quite a lot, and I think part of the reason is, like I'm sure the rest of my panelists, I grew up in community. I grew up in this community, and it's a very close-knit community. It's basically featured in all of my books because it had such an important role in my life as a young person. And so now that I'm entering into a new profession as a writer, I know how important it is to find that community. But just like my panelists have said, it's very isolating. I was at the Writers Trust Gala. It's like a big party that they had, that the Writers Trust, which is a very prestigious award. I was invited to the gala. It's called the Storytellers Gala, which is fun, on Wednesday. But me and my guest, we were the only two hijabi women in the room. And though they had some diversity, we were one of the few people of color who were invited. And so a lot of times when you get to these kind of prestige events, oftentimes the people in that community, and I would say being able to contribute to the arts in any capacity, whether it's making an intricate and beautiful floor arrangement, building a building, I don't know what you do, or writing books, oftentimes those places are very white spaces, especially when it comes to accessing power. So I think that as much as they need us kind of like, I don't know, brown wash or, like color wash their websites, we need to also find allies within that group who will hopefully give us the opportunities, provide us with the networking opportunities. So I'm a little bit cynical about this. Like I want to make friends who can help me, and in turn, I can help them as well.
Right. I want to delve into asking you guys individual questions, but Hannah said something that's been sticking with me about the difficulty of kind of getting through that first year of like stepping foot into a space and being like, I don't know, like I don't know if this is for me. I don't know if this is going to be easy or a healthy space for me. And I think that's a difficulty that many people deal with when you enter into a space and you're the only one. There's a difference, I think, between being able to succeed and being able to succeed in a way that serves you and others, where you're not going home like, I guess, pulling your hijab, like struggling and think, I don't want to go back, don't want to go back. So I'm wondering if, in retrospect, either three of you have any advice for someone who might be entering into one of your fields or a similar one or a university, Hannah, who's struggling with that first step and who's like trying to convince themselves not to quit.
Okay, I'll get started because I have the mic. It's really hard. I can speak from someone who wants to, if you're interested in the arts, if you're ever thought about writing a book, writing a play, perhaps writing for television and film, you can definitely do that. I believe in you. I don't know you, but I believe in you. It's really difficult to break into any field, whether it's the arts or anything really. Like it's hard to get like any kind of job. So I would say first of all, you have to arm yourself with courage, right? And you have to arm yourself with bravery. And the other thing that you have to do is realize that, like my presence, for instance, in that ball that I went to Wednesday it did something. It meant something. And I hope that the books that I write will also have an influence. But all of that is kind of the end result of a very long journey. And I think what we have to remind ourselves is that that journey starts with your conviction in who you are and what you want to bring to this world and how you want to contribute. If this is the way that you want to contribute, if this is like the talent that Allah has blessed you with, and this is what you're able to do, then I think it's your responsibility, as long as it's healthy and it's not, uh, making you embark on a road that you're not comfortable with. I think it's your responsibility to keep walking on that road as far as you can, as far as it's good for you.
Yeah, I think just leading off what you're saying is going in with courage. But the thing that comes is, how do you get that courage? So for me, it was really thinking about the fact that if I were to leave, that's one less woman sitting in this classroom. And if there's already only 2 of us, the one other girl is gonna be left by herself. So that's really something that encouraged me to keep going on and to also know that for the future, so that I can improve the fact, and whoever wants to go into engineering, feel free to talk to me. I'll let you into the inside tips and how to really get into the space so that we definitely can improve our numbers.
Um, I think piggybacking on what Uzma was saying about if you if you have the talent, if Allah has given you this talent, then to be courageous and go for it and know that that is where you belong and that is what you know what you are put here to do. I really had to um, gain the courage and question myself a lot because I'm a mother of 5. I started this actual floral design career late in my life, I would say, and just trying to move from being a basic florist, um, which I can do in any sort of space, like a South Asian space or African space or whatever, like being amongst people that I'm comfortable being around, my own community, Muslim community, things like that. But I found that there was a whole uh, sector out there, a whole space out there that would I would be able to display my floral design in, and that is not the same as the spaces that I was used to, and I really had to muster up the courage and say, you know what, no, I can actually be in those spaces. I can be, standing on a stage with like I'm the only person of color, never mind the hijab, but like the only person of color. Um, being one of the people who've displayed, their floral art, and it might seem like a minor thing, like floral art, whatever, like, you know what I mean? Like, but, it really is when Allah gives you something, then He knows that if you do it with everything that you have and you have the courage and stuff like that, that you are representation. And so many times I found myself, in places and spaces where my representation actually mattered, and, like, people in the audience or whatever would be like, "Wow, like, I can't believe, you're a Muslim and a hijabi doing these sort of things." And they might not they might not have been a hijabi, but they were Muslim, and, even though they didn't identify with the hijab, but they would just be like, "You actually stood there in a hijab in these spaces?" So, I think definitely it's just trying to find that courage, and it's getting a community, like a small little community around you to uplift you in those moments, whether it be your family members or friends or other people in your industry to help you out, and to remind you of your talent and to remind you that you do belong in those spaces.
I love that. I will also say I grew up on movies, and florists and floral designers are the foundation of those stories. So it's I'm going to pitch that to you. Think about that. I'm going to ask you guys some individual questions about your respective industries. I'll start with you, Uzma. And so being a writer, I think there's a pathway or a trajectory to getting your things published, right? So you work in isolation, you come up with this piece, and you have to pitch it to an editor, or you have an editor, or maybe a publisher. And essentially, there's going to be someone along this road who's going to say, "Yeah, this is great. We should publish this," or "No." And your industry is really famous for knows, you know, for a lot of people wanting to do it and having someone, whether that's the first editor that you speak to or a number of different magazines and publishers say, I don't know if you got it, or I don't know if this is right. I'm wondering if you have thoughts or advice between differentiating between like a no that's coming from like a constructive critical lens that like that no is no, I think you could do better, or no, maybe there's a different platform for you, and a different kind of no, a gatekeeping kind of no, a I don't know if this is for you no, or I don't think you should be trying this no. How can we tell the difference between those two?
That's a good question, very nuanced question. I would say ultimately it doesn't really matter because a no is a no. Uh, what what really matters is how you take that no. Because if you, whether it's a gatekeeping no or it's a oh you don't have any talent no, it's up to you to realize well this is something that I really want to do, and I'm maybe that outlet is never going to accept me at this point because of whoever's in charge or whoever's the person there. Maybe I need to shift tack and then think about my new strategy and try another place and then try another place. That's why you know community is so important because then you can if you have some allies who are also perhaps in the same field you're at or have a similar ability to you can give your pieces to them. Like I have a few Muslim fellow Muslim writers and whenever I have like a book idea, they're the first person, even before my literary agent, forget my editor, they're the first people that I talk to. And I say, is this a good idea? Do you think this has legs? And because they support me, they're like, yeah, yeah, for sure. And then they'll follow it up by reading my first draft or reading my first couple of chapters and giving me really constructive feedback. That being said, especially in the arts, no's come for everybody. I still get rejected all the time, right? It happens at every level. Maybe if you get to an extremely successful level and you start making a lot of money, then perhaps you don't hear the no's that often. But there are rejections on every level. And that's what I was talking about in terms of bravery. You have to be really brave to. Sometimes it's even if you're even if Allah has blessed you with a certain talent or Allah has blessed you with the opportunity to perhaps like live in a relatively peaceful country like Canada where you can devote yourself to art, right? Because we know there are people around the world who are a little bit more worried about survival rather than making art. Even with all of those advantages, it can still be incredibly difficult to A, have the confidence, B, have the opportunity, C, have the luck to actually have anything. So accept the no as like, you're doing something, you're trying. That's more than most people ever do. And the fact that you can take that no and then realize that, you know what, this time it didn't happen, inshallah, the next time it will. Uh, that means that you're already halfway on your journey to becoming an artist or fulfilling your destiny.
I love that. All right, Hannah, regarding engineering, I think one question that used to come up a lot when I was in high school, and I also hear amongst like some young people that I speak to around like, is engineering for them? Is it something that I want to do? I feel like there are so many different experiences that you can have as an engineer, but the most famous one is like the work is so much. Like, will I have a life? You know, am I going to be doing homework or am I going to be at the university until 10 p.m.? And that is probably definitely the reality. I'm wondering if you have any coping mechanisms for students who are thinking about doing engineering or something that's like equally taxing that can help them understand how to kind of maneuver that and maybe still figure out if you figured it out at all how to have maybe a little bit of a personal life.
Okay. Yes, there's a lot of math. There's a lot of math. Personal life, inshallah. But I think if you're thinking about doing engineering, is one thing is if you think about it, just go for it. Because there's always gonna be that little thing in the back of your mind is I could have been an engineer, but I didn't do it. So that's why I really just went for it. So inshallah, by the time I graduate, I can say I'm an engineer. So just go for it. Make sure you do have a strong fundamentals in math and you do enjoy it to some extent in high school. And that will kind of carry over to university. Are you going to be enjoying it a lot of the times? No, if I'm being fully honest. But just really remembering why you started engineering in the first place is probably the best reason to, like, as a coping mechanism to keep you going forward. So have a strong reason why you chose engineering.
I think that's good advice for all industries, honestly. Know why you're there. Okay, so Bilqis, around floral design, I think there are a lot of images that pop up in my head when I think about floral design or florists and why I might walk into one of your studios, for example, and say, hey, I need a bouquet of X for this occasion. But can you talk to us about maybe some unexpected elements of your job or your industry or different kinds of events or clients that you get that we might not know about or maybe even surprise you in this role?
Um, well, first of all, being a florist is a very physically tasking job. People don't really think about that as when they see the final results, but putting it together is physically tasking, and it's something that you definitely need to have some kind of passion and love for florals. In my particular art, I don't use anything artificial, so it's always fresh or dried florals, which makes it a little bit harder because you have to keep them fresh. Um, as I went along, probably about I want to say 3 years ago, 4 years ago, or something like that, I I sort of pivoted my business out of um, the spaces that I was in. Unfortunately, it was like my community. I have to say I had to move a little bit out of that because it didn't allow for me to do the things that I wanted to do in terms of like my art and also to the clientele and being able to make money properly from my art form. So because I wasn't just putting together flowers like a regular florist, I knew that I had to move into another space to be able to create what I wanted to create. And because of that, I found myself in spaces, and this is why I'm saying, finding myself in spaces where I'm like the only person of color and things like that. Um, you know, there's a show called Fleur de Ville, and it happens twice a year, and I've been a participant in it uh, twice before, and going to be doing it again in December. It's basically like a floral design. There's a mannequin downtown, and you have to design it entirely out of fresh flowers, and it has to stay fresh for 5 days. So yeah, it's a challenge, but I love that sort of thing. And recently, I did florals for TIFF, so that actually opened me up into some other spaces. So yeah, unfortunately, like to keep it real, you need to keep your eyes and your mind open in terms of like just moving into different spaces and not being afraid of that. And probably Usma, you probably know what I'm talking about, right? So and just knowing that you're if you feel that you have this passion and you can see what you want to create, and you can see a path in front of you and Allah opens doors for you, and just be able to walk through it with your talent basically, and then things will be open up, and inshallah maybe the Muslim community and our community will catch up with all the talent that we have in our community in terms of, especially like I've considered myself old, but like but like just the young people and all the talent that we have in terms of art in our community is outstanding, but we are not like creating a platform for them. And that's unfortunate, but inshallah, with different kinds of events and even the young people coming and starting different, just putting on different events and allowing for these people to actually display their art and, perform and do what they need to do. Uh, Inshallah, it'll happen.
I love that. I'm also making a mental note to tap you the next time I'm trying to keep a plant alive because I can't believe you 5 days fresh flowers. Yeah. Oh my God. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. All right. So I want to kind of round us out, inshallah, for the night with one final question for the whole lot of you. That's a bit, it's a bit of a conceptual question. If we were to build like a library, and in that library was supposed to be books that have either inspired you or books that you recommend to others to inspire them on their path, what would you put in it and why?
Wow. Um, I think that question was not really right for me because I'm not an avid reader. But but I mean, I think what I would put in it is resources for people who are in different arts and just the history of art in Muslim in terms of Islamic history of art, basically. And we a lot of times that's lost from us, and our kids don't know that, like, the history of art in Islam is just so deep and so rich, and we just never get a chance to even see even a portion of it, and I think that would definitely be in the library that you know
Yeah, I'm also not somebody that's an avid reader of fiction. I typically read a lot of scientific journals. But if I had to say, definitely the Quran as a Muslim, but also a lot of things about history and the fact that women were denied access to education, Black people were denied access to education, and that's really something that keeps me going because being a representative, I always remember the fact that I'm lucky enough to even be in this space, as so many slaves died fighting for the right to have access to education. So that's something that always keeps me going forward. So just again, knowing why you're doing what you're doing in engineering.
Okay, so books obviously buy mine. I'm selling a whole bunch of them out there, and all the proceeds go to Gaza. They're $20 each, so buy mine. But in general, there's so many Muslim writers. I actually think that the community doesn't know as much. Maybe this can be a future event or something. But how many Muslim writers there are out there just in North America? One of the writers that I think would be uh, really interesting is G. Willow Wilson. She's a graphic novelist, but she also wrote this beautiful memoir. She's a white woman who converted to Islam when she was very young. The book is called The Butterfly Mosque. It's really great. She also wrote All of the Unseen and a couple of other books. We have in our own community, SK Ali, Sajid Kuti has written a series of books. Buy her books as well. They're fantastic. And those are just two women that I can think of off the top of my head, but there are so many more. I just wanted to add one final thing before we wrap is, when Bilkis, when you were talking about, going into different spaces, I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind as a community is, like, especially as women, don't be afraid to be ambitious, right? Don't be afraid to kind of not with the purpose of breaking barriers, but like thinking bigger for yourself. I think is something that we should definitely encourage, especially among the younger women in our community, also the older women in our community. We should think bigger, be ambitious for yourself. Habs.
I love that. So that brings me to, all right, we have time for a few questions. That brings me to the end of mine. I wanted to open it up to the audience. If anyone has any questions that they would like to ask, any advice that they would like to seek. No? Yeah? Oh, okay.
um how
Let
to
me
let
repeat the
I'm
sorry. Let me repeat the question. I realized it.
oh, okay.
Yeah. So this is a question about floral design. About how did you learn about the industry and how did you get into it specifically?
Um, I think you also asked about how did I learn it, right? Yeah. So I'm self-taught, so that's basically trial and error. But I did get into plants and things. That my grandmother had a garden that was, I considered it beautiful. A lot of people thought it was wild and crazy, but but I do remember being there with her and just seeing how she planted the plant, like the different flowers beside each other, and it kind of like, just looking back, I realized that gave me like perspective on the way the flowers bloom beside each other. I don't know if that makes sense, but so that's kind of like the base, and then from there I just I started just doing floral work, basic floral works for weddings and events and things like that. And when I decided to make it a business, and actually go into it full time. That was a very serious decision, very, scary, but alhamdulillah, like going into that and then, just building my business. And so, yeah, so I'm self-taught and I actually teach people now. So, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question. Yeah.
I know there's a question here.
Who do you look up to? Like, who are your role models?
Who are my role models? The sister Roxana Khan is also a writer from the community. She was very kind when I was my writing journey and gave me some good advice. Um, I mean, I look up to my parents. They're in the crowd here, of course. And I think just coming from a South Asian community, from like a Desi community, like I grew up with like stories. My parents would tell me stories of their childhood back home or family history. So really, it's we all stand on the shoulders of giants, right? So the giants are our elders who have raised us up. So all of my family.
Is your favorite? Which of your books that you've written is your favorite?
Uh, hmm, I guess I have a special place in my heart for my first book, Aisha at Last, because it was the first one that actually went somewhere. And then aside from that, the book that came out the the most recently is Much Ado About Nada. I think my husband says is his favorite one. So I guess I like that one the best right now.
We have one question from the audience back here, but I'm going to speak on behalf of the questioner. This is for Hannah, and it's about what kind of entrepreneurial endeavors are you up to? Have you considered, and how do they, if they do at all, connect with engineering?
So when I first started entrepreneurship, my things weren't directly involved in engineering. For example, I started Terra Cosmetics, a natural soap company. Um, Currently, it's hard to balance between that and engineering, but I'm definitely looking forward to starting a venture specifically based on what I've learned through engineering. And the way that I'm cultivating that is I'm actually volunteering with a startup. So, really gaining hands on knowledge so that I'll be able to apply that to my own ventures. So, hopefully, in the future, inshallah, good things are coming.
Looking at yourself now, is there anything you'd like to say to your younger self?
Um, Honestly, it's keep dreaming big because for me, my whole goal in high school was to get into Waterloo engineering. Alhamdulillah, I achieved that. But in the process of going for Waterloo engineering, I managed to achieve something even bigger. I never would have thought that I would have achieved the scholarship that I did. But because I was on the path of dreaming really big, I ended up getting something even bigger than I dreamed. So keep dreaming big and preparing for everything and keeping your options open. Like I know a lot of people are in high school and they decide not to take all the maths because they're really sure at the moment what they want to do. But I say always keep your options open so that in the event that a big opportunity comes about, you can go for it and you have the necessary skills for it.
I can answer that question too, actually, but not, I wouldn't say I would, something I would tell myself. It's something I tell my children who are pretty old. So young old, basically, they're adults. Well, four of them. I would, and what I tell them is that, I mean, subhanAllah, we have Islam as our way of life. And in its perfection, we are able to just let Allah be your guide. Like, he's given you talents, he's given you skills, he's given you abilities. And if you allow, if you keep your eyes open and your heart and your mind open, he will show you where you need to go. And he will guide you in the directions. And if you're, making your istikhara and doing what you need to do to ask for guidance, he will guide you in the direction that you need to go. And that's especially for people who are in the arts, like most of my kids are in the arts, but especially for people who are in the arts, because that's such a difficult, career choice to make, because, everyone's just always afraid of, and rightly so, how are you going to make money and do and all that. And then, the spaces that you're going into might not be the most halal. But if you go in it with the right intention and allow yourself to see what Allah is putting in front of you, I think that's basically all that you need to start anything, really.
All right, I think we have one last one, and then inshallah, we're going to wrap up.
Assalamu alaikum, jazakallah. All the three young sisters here have contributed to art so much. I just want to let you know that arts had centuries of being a main area of work. Science is kind of a stepchild in most of our careers. If you go back to the history, there's nothing so intensive about art. So many contributions. It actually reflected our own civilizations. People measured our civilizations through art. The sciences came later on. Unfortunately, in the last couple of centuries, arts have been put on the side burner, as the sister said, that for the money factors and earnings and whatnot. But I think the younger generation should maybe kind of revive back to art. I think it's about time that we were so great, the Islamic civilization and the others, all the authors, they have done so much of work. It's a strong recommendation for all the youngsters, even the older ones. Some people at age 65 have written novels and get Pulitzer Awards too. So, it could be young and old. Jazakallah again from the elders to the youngsters to continue and do your best as you can, inshallah. Jazakallah.
That's my dad, guys. That's my dad.
Right, and that brings us, Hamana, to the very end of our program today. First of all, give it up for the women on the panel. We want to thank you all for your participation today and for your continued patronage of the IIT. I know that there's a henna booth here for anyone who's interested in henna. As Uzma mentioned, her books are being sold on the other side of this veil. And that brings us to the end of the night. So jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Actually, wait, there's an announcement.
Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Just very quickly, I want to say thank you to all of our speakers and our panelists, Sister Janella, Sister Sakina, Sister Uzma, Sister Bilqis, Sister Hana, and Sister Amina. The sisters are ruling today. I'm feeling a little left out. So maybe we need to have a panel with some brothers next time, inshallah. So once again, this is our final session for Islamic History Month. I'd like to thank all of you who supported us and who came out. The videos are recorded and they are online. Please share them with everyone that you know. And inshallah, once again, tomorrow we have the protest for Gaza. I encourage all of you to attend. As I said, we have 3 buses going tomorrow. I think we have just a few spaces left. If you would like to go tomorrow on a bus, you can put your name down in the lobby. Our sister is there with the sign-up sheet. If you do sign up, ensure that you show up. And we're also looking for some sponsors for these buses. Finally, none of this program, Islamic History Month, could have happened without one person, and that person is sitting here, Sheikh Dr. Abdullah Hakim Quick. Please give him a very big hand of applause. Jazakumullah khair. He has been the mainstay and the bedrock of this institution, and I would be remiss if I don't say a word of thanks to him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. You are a gem in our community, and please pray for him and for his health and for his longevity to be in this community, to continue with us, inshallah, and so with all our shuyukh. Let's close with the dua. We have snacks afterwards, so you can participate in the snacks afterwards. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.